dopamines and acetylcholines is the way they're able to, the sympathetic and parasympathetic programs are able to influence how much we learn on specific subjects and how fast we learn on specific subjects. So there are certain jobs that activate certain parts of the brain when there's just the slightest bit of esoteric energy around it, creates an amplified placebo effect, which allows someone to create a small no-time field to access their greater genius.
Like with all the statement that's most important to me is like what I said about the free will universe. Everything is valid. And that's where you actually appreciate the purpose and be in the sacred neutral with it, because you see it as an infinite potential for triggering in the journeys of people, you know? So there's powerful association with that, to me, and it's appreciation of it, and there's no wrong with anything anyone does. The key is, what do you do out of it, you know?
That's right. So Mandy.
Yes, sir.
What is your view on the external validation that Andre has brought up with? Because there's a unique point of view when it's coming to a lot of people seeking external validation for so many things.
Well, I have a couple of perspectives on that. One, if you're seeking external validation, then it's a means of escaping what's internal.
Mm-hmm.
And another layer to it is the suspension of belief.
Suspension of belief of value of your own thoughts.
Exactly.
Suspension of belief in you're the apex of your own hierarchical order. Believing in the hierarchical order. That's the raw structure right there.
Yep.
And if we can figure out how to show that raw structure, you can create specific contract revocations just for that and allow people to tailor it to their own life experience. So they can make a separation of density of what was the forced evolution in their life and what was a natural organic evolution. Because so many people want to know, was that girlfriend or that boyfriend or that college teacher I had, were they meant to be, or did it organically grow because I tried to create something, not my fetus creating everything? Because we do create things that the fetus doesn't dream up. It just dreams up a blueprint usually. We're the ones that got to do it. We have free will to change it.
That's why that statement, I in the ever-present co-creative moment of now, is the suspension of belief.
There's nobody else other than that moment of now.
Yep.
The one speaking. All the other ones are in the past or the future. There can only be one moment of the now. One signature frequency moment of the now. There can be many moments of the now. There's only one signature frequency, though.
Yeah. Like I love that line though, because it's what are you bringing into that in that moment. Like it's a good way to write down a list of the preconceived concepts. You know, just in exploring what are you preventing yourself to having an experience of from this moment on, based on what you've been through and all that.
That's right.
But say, like, for one example, the external validation, it's like, you know, particularly for women, the body image is such a main thing in our society. And, like, you put clothes on and stuff, and it's like, do I look good in this, you know? I mean, I appreciate the thing is, like, getting a compliment and stuff, but then there's also, like, I need someone to confirm what I might not confirm in myself, you know? So...
it's that validation.
Yeah. You know, you don't need someone else to validate it, just like accept yourself, you know. And using women in that example is probably like pretty dicey in some respects, but it's just a good example, you know, it happens all the time. So without even knowing it all the time.
Hold on one second. I'm going to put a link here in a second. 1817, the coin was termed.
Fascinating.
It is.
Cognitive estrangement.
In fiction involves using a person's ignorance to promote suspension of disbelief.
Yeah.
Interesting words.
So the 555 telephone number, if you scroll to the bottom of the wiki, you'll see alsos. That is a really, really good one where in movies that everything is 555.
Yeah, I know that.
So
Interesting how they also note paradox.
Uh-huh. Video games usually require suspension of disbelief to explain abstract game mechanics, even in games with realistic visuals or narratives. Due to the nature of game levels, they are usually bound by invisible walls, restricting the player from exploring further, even if they should technically be able to. Games such as multiplayer first-person shooters enforce boundary lines on levels by causing the player to perish when attempting to go out of bounds. That's everything we were talking about.
It also says the tense of suspension of belief is past, present, future.
Yes! These guys were some thinkers.
I get it. It's like self-imposing your own pen, like in
Yep.
a field sort of thing. Like as a sheep, they try and like bust open, like get past the fence, and there's electronic like countermeasures, and it's like they associate the fence with a countermeasure, so they don't even try it after a while.
Yep.
So in social sort of programming and stuff, it's like concepts are sort of bled through, and they're associated with sort of an outcome, and they're repeated like numerous times to set up a program.
Yep.
But I sort of see what you're saying with games. It's like it creates a potential of suspension of what we know in a fantasy sort of environment.
Yes, that's that cognitive estrangement. So the last part of the first paragraph in the wiki where it's got a bolded cognitive, if you read that, it's just what you're saying, yeah? It's even a little bit more. So the suspension of disbelief and the engagement of belief is the science of abusing the placebo to manifest mystical in a boundary of accepted physics. Taming the mystical. That's what reality experiments are.
Yeah, and then because it's such a ingrained social sort of engineering program, it's like then you've got the peer group sort of pressure. So we sort of impose it on each other,
That's right.
Yeah. It's like, you can't do that. No way. Tell him he's dreaming, It's like those sort of concepts are sort of seen as ridicule,
Uh-huh.
So if you're set up for external validation, your peers will operate in this way,
Oh.
and shut you down on a conscious level, potentially. Interesting conversation.
As always with Andrew, isn't it? Suspension of belief
That's right.
in the ever-present co-creative moment of now.
Yeah, but the 90s era was very interesting. So it's like fascinating. We covered all those sort of aspects of it.
There was something else that I wanted to do, and I just can't remember it.
Was the law or anything?
No. It was pulling a thread of the whole conversation that we've had for the last hour and a half. It'll come to me in a second.
So the 90s, the wizards, the internet, the technology.
Yeah.
I'm afraid.
Can you just bullet point a little that? I'll have to piece it from that.
Yeah.
Because it's like bringing like 25 topics to synthesize one.
Yeah.
All right, so the first line was in the ship captains. All right, the ship captains are the freight companies. They are the modern wizard class, but technological wizards. That is something they needed in off-world vessels. So just as in previous eras, ship captains were the AAA league and sometimes the high-end ringers that could be brought into other places because of the value of experience that you have from one individual and their knowledge base. That needed to be integrated from military ship captains as well as just standard ship captains who are carrying cargo that could be entwined with their cargo. So when they were going world to world in cargo transfer missions, that the captain had a lot to do with the cargo. It's in general. Now, the way the Babylonian money curse intertwined with the captain, which is forced evolution to force a being into a high layer of refinement of psychic skills in the unseen world, so that when they became off-world, all of those unseen skills became seen, direct, manifest skills. And that's genetic farming in a nutshell. Okay. Materialism, transport, international taxation, money, India, digital banking. Digital banking is how ship captains can take debt from one planet and bring it to another. Okay? The Y2K and the law and the wall and the law, that is something else that they brought as systems of belief to be observed by other forced evolution organizations that were looking for a new tactic to employ in their own territory. Just as we would have trade shows, the Confederation has their version of forced evolution trade shows that they invite other people to come and see. That's the blueprint for the off-world trading and the continuation of the DNA farming. Stock trading, publicly listed mercenary companies. Now, that was to fully accept militarization as a cognitive function and to engage the cognitive disbelief that, there can be something other than the military in existence. Because everyone has a belief, the suspension of belief, there can be no other military than the military in the country. Until all of a sudden there's a legal military mercenary unit that exists within the country. The bankers are what household and store that. Ships, off-world ships, are basically their own mobile banks. That's about all I can put together on there. And then there's something that'll synthesize all of that in a minute as I process it. Mandy, was there another question you had about the off-world organizations using forced evolution?
It reminds me of the Aliens movie, so... Oh, sorry, I wasn't muted. I muted myself when I came back.
So,
Triggered me, but it was like, I came back and the first word I heard was from Mandy, wow. It's like, what did I miss?
Yeah.
So the amount of suspension of belief that happens when somebody's internet call drops during a very heightened conversation.
my parasympathetic got triggered.
Yeah. I remember a lot of my old shows that would get interfered with, and the majority of it was just at that era internet overages in the particular area, or bandwidth issues, or just the connection itself. And then yes, the classic times where it was the psychic energy interfering with it. You know, all of a sudden people are like, ah, and then they've got to regain their disbelief.
Yeah, it's an interesting chat though.
Reality functions and mechanics. You know, I personally have been through at least 300 worlds that have gone through the change like this. And there are others that I've read that have done it like, 1,500 times or more. I mean, they're like, junkies of it. But that's that expression of the higher density military intelligence. Understanding where non-battles will become non-battles in the future in time.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that's the way I get the concept that it's a stalemate on so many levels, and it's up to us with feet on the ground, to actually be the ones that contribute to the subtle shit,
That's right. Act as the interface of the quanta, the counting and the numbering, enumeration of the actual infinite.
Yeah. How are you guys going?
Good.
Good.
There was something else I wanted to say about Starship Captains, but it is eluding me at this moment. It had something to do with the light ship thingies and farming. That was saying that was the last 150 years, the job structure, whatever you want to call it, ship captains were the greatest graduating class from the genetic farming.
Well, the off-world trade. Yeah,
let's suppose that
Yes.
you're writing a really important email to a colleague. Or a post on Facebook that all your friends will see.
Where are you?
Or a paper for your English class that you just have to get an A in.
Your unseen computer world. That is the other thing that the tech industry brought, was a way for the unseen world to affect the seen world.
Ah.
Direct effect.
Psychic parasites and stuff?
No. Psychic parasites can be transferred through light bulbs and electricity current. This was a way to abuse the reality rules so that if somebody was talking to somebody through the computer, like through this format or just through texting, their light bodies come through the wires and are able to be propagated through the CPU process.
Fascinating.
It's all about reality. Learning how to abuse it.
What about also, like, say the co-creative dreaming energy and stuff, like with all this new technology, to say you have access to more things? Is there any aspects related to the Dreamtime sort of thing going on?
Yes, as much as I've described everything in the last couple hours, there's a whole dream side to all of that too, because we are through belief, beings of duality. Every time we wake up and every time we go to sleep, we experience the duality and accept it, or suspension of belief of it, or suspension of disbelief that we're not a single being. Thus why forced evolution is so enticing to many people. If I've created forced evolution, I must have dreamed it ahead of time, which influences the philosophy of belief. I'm a signature frequency match for something I'm created. No, you're a signature frequency match because you were duped and you're gullible. You bought into a system and an ideology.
Yeah. And you had a vested interest potentially in the outcome for yourself.
That's right, which created the law of expectation or limitation that allowed self-abuse.
Yeah. Vested interest is a huge thing in itself. One thing I was actually going to say is like we skipped the topics quite quickly, and I didn't want to interrupt you. But say this goes back to sort of like how you can use sort of the postal system and that, you know, by sending with intent, like going back to writing letters, you know, and sending it through the postal sort of system. And like me, I like sending crystals to people around the world, you know, and to sort of like negate the geometry of these sort of things, like by your intent. You know, you're not doing anything with any intent for harm, but by your ceremonial sort of work in that respect can actually add to.
How much does a stamp cost you?
Like less than $1, like not much.
So you're engaging the Babylonian money system on many levels. If you understand the many levels of what the post means through what it makes it buy versus it a service, etc., all the darkness and all the positive that can come with, you know, the sharing the post.
Yeah.
So when you able to separate those natural 1 degree of separations versus the artificially, magically, or technologically created 1 degree of separation, we then begin to not believe in natural synchronicity anymore. And when the soul focus goes back to non-organic, inorganic synchronicities, you are fully disconnected from your unseen ancestral world. Unseen and ancestral world. Because a new unseen world is entangling you.
Yes.
Right. Which is trying to capture yourself as it is the next generation of belief. So that last belief can fall into race amnesia by removing the teachings of the history and changing the history as we go.
Yeah.
Back to the cloud.
Yeah. It is quite fascinating what you can forget in a short amount of time.
That's right.
You mentioned about the short-term memory, that said people that have the belief that they don't forget, you know. So
Well, I know I forget.
yeah.
I mean, certain topics that I'm thoroughly practiced on that I can do without thought. And then there are other ones where I'm cognitively processing light language and the reading skill, then formulating it into English, and then taking the formulated English and trying to make a structure of context. So I can step the information down and into the understanding level. That's, you know, just how I'm playing with the process.
Yeah.
DNA, descendant now ancestors. What was that in reference to, Mandy?
About how the technological has also altered our own natural blueprint, our own natural DNA blueprints.
Right, because it's guiding us through forced evolution to accept the inorganic stream of synchronicities that the 7 future generations are trying to use as a spiritual algorithm to create spiritual contracts through the future through streams of light. So if you are on the inorganic expression and the child wants to be on the organic expression, it can't come in unless it wants to take that other expression. Yeah, stopping our own descendants of ourselves from evolving too. Breaks the change of natural self-evolution that all souls go through. It's not about what you do and all of the things you create or don't create. It is truly about lifetime to lifetime endurance and gaining joy and happiness out of them. It's not about success. It is just about joy, happiness, and love.
Yeah.
Those are the three natural things that will occur, and a soul will evolve to great new levels. What it chooses to do with that awareness of great new levels will ultimately be determined at what scale it wants to impact its environment. Suspension of disbelief.
It's interesting because in Greek culture, when a man passes away, those are the three specific questions that they ask.
Really? I didn't know that.
Those are the three specific questions that they ask, and that's what will the community then either looks at him as being a successful man for generations to come.
Yep.
Because he did find those three specific things.
Joy, happiness, and love.
Yeah. It wasn't about how many sheep you had or...
Right. Or how many olive trees or who your olive oil was better than his wine. Competitional stuff.
Exactly.
It's about the impact. You know how hard it is to be non-competition in a business world?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, you have to make non-competitional products. In a competitional world.
Yeah, like creating organic sort of, or not organic, but original sort of, say, genres in an industry, or not an industry, but in a market space. Like creating something brand new with no reference is very rare.
Right.
You know, it's usually doing something that someone else is already doing, but you just want to do it better, essentially, or you can give an alternative to something that's already out there.
That's right.
And it's the intention.
Absolutely.
The intention, yeah. The power of intention that has the power of belief, that has the engagement of the placebo, that has the power of the soul, that doesn't matter because it's a non-agenda side, and the placebo is just a way to balance the agenda and non-agenda side that relates to spiritual contracts. There's that formula right there. That's what I was trying to get to. The placebo, the formula to the placebo.
Well, I'm glad I got that recorded.
Yeah.
I'm gonna listen to that. I think I was trying to focus, and it was like.
Me too. It was brilliant.
Wow.
It can be its own. It can be its own standalone extended teaching that connects into a lot of what is required in personal suspension of disbelief, so you can get into some of the advanced light mechanics, so that they can be spoken in a non-telepathic format. So that it actually is in the colloquial now. It's vital that it's in the colloquial now. There can be graphical aids, but the colloquial now should be able to create the mind image itself and the frequency vibration, so that the light mechanic rules is a direct translation of the actual light language. Because they're still base 26 alphabet, so.
Yeah.
Which is something else that if we want to have some kind of mathematical explanation, we can use the base 26, alpha numeric system. Or it's not base 20, 36, whatever you want to call it. Which is, hyperdimensional light math, which is what I use to create my, let's just say, system of pattern recognition when something that's being projected at me as a cipher. So I can recognize the pattern in a cipher and probably decipher it simultaneously if my focus and awareness are clear with intent of the moment-to-moment being making the choice.
So your state of being has an aspect to the access, essentially, what you're saying. So as
Yeah.
a foundation, the sacred neutral is core to actually the relationship to perception.
Yeah, there's
If I dare use it in that short term, which is...
Yeah. There is a duration there. Because when does moment-to-moment end? Cricket.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's like, depends which reality you're operating in. If you're operating in the broad time reality, then a moment has a variable, but if you're operating in no time, then what is a moment?
Well, there are no moments in no time.
Yeah, exactly.
So moment-to-moment ends when we stop our suspension of belief or disbelief. When we don't have to believe or disbelieve in anything. That's when we become non-agenda beings. Fourth density. I can see the hamster wheels turning.
No, I get it.
Oh, I get it too.
I'm like appreciating time for being a boundary, you know. That's all it is. But it adds a lot, you know, for what it offers, and like I said, there's no wrong in a free will universe. So it is what it is. So
Technically, there is a wrong in a free world universe when one is being dumb. That is just wrong.
Well, I mean, like, yeah, I mean, and karma to me is like the consequence of exploring some aspects of this free will. Like totality, there's consequence for action, you know.
Yeah.
So, yeah, my statement was not entirely accurate, but there's purpose for exploration and everything, you know.
Yep.
So, even like me, like say I get the concept of where time was implemented because of like the local realities were conquered, and then a church was set up with a bell to signify the change in times, you know, just that ring of the bell.
Ring-a-ding-ding. Send your money to the Pope.
Yeah. But even like the construction of the bells and the frequency that they offered, you know.
That's right.
It was
Technology. That was the only that was, you know, again, that was back in the day where very few noises were technologically created.
Yeah. Non-natural, yeah.
Yeah.
And then it would ring at certain times of whatever, and then it would start being like integrated into the memory, you know.
That's right.
And society started conforming to it, which
right. And then in cities it started to ring every hour of every night.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's fascinating.
The shadow.
Like in my city, I live very close to the main train line, or tram line, and the trams used to be very, very noisy. What happens is that you start getting accustomed to that audio sort of sound, where it's there, but it's in a subconscious way, you know. So it's like a subtle subconscious reference, but it doesn't interfere with your experience until you actually push focus towards it. So like you're saying, I'm sort of feeling how it would have been such a unique frequency in the audio range, but then after such an extensive use, years, decades and stuff, it would have been there, but it wouldn't have been there, you know.
Uh-huh. Until suddenly that's a part of your dream world.
Yeah.
But the body may have a trouble not sleeping with that energy noise.
Absolutely.
Huh? There's a classic example of many people who live in the city. As soon as they move to the country, the silence drives them crazy.
Yeah.
Every little bug, every little thing, everything makes a noise, drives them crazy.
Yeah.
What? And then vice versa, the people that are in silence, and there's never any silence in the city.
Yeah.
Always an ambulance, always something, always noise is coming on. So when I first moved to San Jose, I lived in an okay neighborhood. It wasn't exactly that bad, but again, San Jose at that time was just you know, there were a lot of rich people there for Silicon Valley. So I basically lived in an area that supported the support people of Silicon Valley. So lots of immigrants that had jobs in all of the places that were there.
Yeah.
So it's like an immigrant area, but everyone was cool. My first night there, at actually being in my own apartment, I look out and I see this helicopter with a searchlight, and I'm wondering, what is that? I'm instantly like, oh, this is going to be like an episode of Cops. So I wouldn't turn the television on, and there was a police helicopter that was live in the footage that was going after, somebody that was racing down the street. I'd seen it on TV, but that's the first time I'd seen it live.
Yeah.
Live. And I read the Akashic of that moment, and it wasn't about the individual driver or their car. It was how everyone was observing that searchlight awake and asleep. Dogs, cats, everything was. Because it was coming through the television at the same time, which is in your broadcast airwaves. Crazy, the reality crossover layers there, just for my own observation of that. It goes to some of the greater mechanics of how incursions in a reality that come from an airborne source on a society that uses gravity and density to define volume and space. Volume, space, and matter. In a hologram.
Yeah.
How we tactilely experience it. That's why DJ light shows, can be some of the most entrancing processes for the eyes to give a brain exercise to experience rhythmic patterns that can have an organic ecstasy factor to it.
Yeah. So I don't want to digress from that, but your first night in San Jose. So you, you saw a real aspect of the reality in real time and stuff.
That was the whole thing, was just observing it, and just the whole lesson of that story was basically it took me about 6 hours to read the whole record of the city and understand how news and police were integrated into the political propaganda story, because this story was reported in other places. Its footage was being used for a TV show. All of the integrated things that were happening around that. The families that were worrying about in the moment, or some person that's living in a house with a 1-month-old baby who's just finally getting 1 full hour of sleep, and the ambulances go by and everything goes by and wakes the kid up, which starts its own karmic affair. Yeah, just from one dude, running from the cops because he had a bag of weed.
Yeah.
We didn't want to be put in jail.
Yeah. I've got a question as well about the internet. Now that we're sort of being on the internet, there's the seen and then there's the unseen, like the dark web. You have anything to offer on that, or we can do it another time if you want?
So anything that is on a computer can be read by the puppet masters. What is a hard drive in technology as you know it?
Hard drive is a storage of like the data in the form of a electronic, magnetic and crystal sort of substance, like in the form of ones and zeros, you know.
Which can be read from orbit or any remote experiencing technological process that can sense those electromagnetic imprints.
Yes, yeah.
So the dark...
Obviously, like from an instance of comparing your ability to perceive light and energy, it offers a pattern, basically.
Right.
And the pattern is the data. And the
Right.
data is a combination of things that allow it to be like, you know,
So the dark web, it is just compartmentalization sharing through a network of energy pathways that can be used to create effects in other areas. So there are a variety of reality experiments within the experiment process that will use telephone lines, data lines to transit light codes through fiber optic networks.
Yeah.
So that an AI can track them, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Because I was just contemplating it, and there's sort of a perception that the dark web is where all the criminals sort of hang out and do all their stuff, you know. So,
No, that's where the state-sanctioned black projects exist there.
yeah,
The child abuse rings, and so on and so forth, the mafias. It's not just for the criminals.
yeah, but the context of public perception, that's the sort
Right.
of thing, you know.
Yeah. So what I was saying before, all data is readable from any location. And a government, there's more than enough military technology right now that exists where they can just, point something at your hard drive and read everything that's on it.
Yeah,
Even if it's unplugged and off.
yeah.
Yeah.
So like the whole illusion of encryption and stuff is just that, you know.
Just as they could read every document of paper in your office too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, the whole whistleblower sort of thing, you know, it's like...
Right. Will they understand your pattern?
Yeah.
Which is why I have chaos in my pattern. Which is my justification.
Yep. You've mentioned many times about switching your routine up all the time, you know. Like, to me, I like to do randomness because there's a relationship between synchronicity and randomness to me. So,
Organized chaos.
Yeah. So sometimes I've done stuff and it's like, oh man, I've got the date wrong and all that, but it's like, nah, there's another purpose to this, like beyond the alert, sunshine, you know, there's something here. Potentially, it's not an expectation, but it's like, there's another reason that you weren't aware of the layout for, you know, it's like that. It's like, okay. It's cool.
So did you catch up on Pizzagate at all?
No, not yet. I don't know anything about it, to be honest.
Don't unless you want to be exposed to some nasty child bullshit.
Okay.
If you wanted to catch up on something, I'll show you an article, but just don't. It's an attempt to expose the child nasty rings, and a lot of it has some truth to it, but there are some incredibly negative processes behind that truth.
Okay. Like zealots and all that sort of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. And then some people that have the overwhelming proof that they exist like actual like officers and stuff like that, and nothing's being done because it goes all the way to the top.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's fascinating. Like last year, I think it was, could even be this year, in Australian federal parliament, one of the independents like brought to public aware like a list of, you know, high-ranking public media sort of officials from the 80s and 70s that had evidence, and he submitted it to public sort of perception in Parliament, and nothing amounted to it, you know. And I've seen the list. It's like it's fascinating. So it's like, yeah, when there's a public perception and an interest, there's a redirection purpose. Not really like you know, it's like an energy harvest or, you know.
Well, that's direct life force harvesting.
Yep.
When they're using the abuse rings like that.
Yeah, it's very murky sort of stuff.
Yeah.